Alright, so remember this remake? The one that turned, you know, an old kind of slasher thriller, kind of revenge story into a woman becoming Jigsaw and hunting men down and setting traps and cutting their dicks off and, yeah, something special. So, of course, they made a sequel. So this one gets set in New York City, rather than somewhere by the woods. And there's like a pretty model girl looking kind of person. She's working at like a pub. Obviously she's down and out with money because you see her apartment. You're like, well, of course she doesn't have a lot of money. Her apartment looks like shit. In her pub, she sees like an ad for, you know, model pictures. Maybe she'll get discovered. Awesome. She gets back to her apartment and her super guy, semi-attractive guy, and her like super guy says to her, pretty girl who knows how to use tools. Wonder if that's foreshadowing for what's gonna happen next. Because if, you know, we're gonna follow with how shit happened in the last movie, yeah. Also, for someone who lives in such a shitty apartment, she takes a lot of cabs to places. Every time there's an establishing shot, she's always just coming out of a cab to a building, not coming out of the subway, you know, not on the way walking there. Nah, you know, maybe if you didn't spend all your money on cabs, you probably had that rent money, you know? So of course she gets to the photographer's place and there's these guys with like Eastern European accents. And it's like, oh wow, this isn't gonna end up bad. So then if you notice the sleepy guy on the big crate thing, and it says do not x-ray, wonder if that's where they usually put the bodies in. So the photographer wants her to get a bit naked, and she's like, nah, that's not what I'm gonna do. Like, I'll go down to my underwear, but I'm not gonna do naked. And the stereotype of European people is like, oh, Americans, you're so prudish, you're not gonna wanna get naked. And she's like, bitch, I'm not gonna wanna get naked. So she leaves. So then one of the brothers, who is like this weird Harpo-looking guy, drops by her apartment with a flash drive with the photos. And she's like, oh my god, what are you doing here? Gross. So she tells him to leave, and he does. But then while she's sleeping, he takes pictures of her while she's sleeping. So of course, you know, immediately what you do is that you get up and you tase the guy. So while she's struggling and fighting the Harpo guy, his super, of course, hears it because she just so happens to live right above him. He comes up, tries to save the day, and poor guy gets shanked. So while he's, like, you know, shanked on the floor, bleeding out, this poor guy has to watch that girl that he most likely has been crushing on since forever get raped by this Harpo dude. And that scene went on for so long. After a while, I was like, oh my god, was he really raping her on camera? My god. So of course now her super's dead, and Harpo is just realizing what he just fucking did, calls his brothers, and it's like, oh my god, I fucked up again. So they get there, and it's like, oh jeez, brother, you did a number on this one. Like, god, man, you totally clogged the toilet, like that kind of response. So then the sleepy brother that you saw previously was like, oh man, I have ketamine in my pocket because that's how convenient that was. And the older photographer brother feeds it to the girl, like, oh no, she's told, like, let's give her some, like, yeah, let's do that, that's how we'll solve her problems. So of course she gets transported overseas, like in that box that said do not x-ray, of course. She wakes up, she finds out that she is chained to the floor, there's like a mattress, it's gross and shit, and she's being raped again! And this time, it's by the ketamine brother! She just wakes up being raped. Oh, fun! So she's smart enough where she was able to escape, go through, like, knock out the brother, go through a window, and then she's obviously running around the streets and, like, things don't look familiar at all. These cops find her, and they're like, you know, are you okay? And then she was just like, where the fuck am I? And then they're like, yeah, you're in like fucking like Bulgaria or some fucking shit. And of course, don't blame her. She's like, oh my god, because I would be too. Like, what the fuck? There's a lady who runs a women's shelter, and she's like, oh, you know, I have a place that you can stay at, and you know, I help, you know, like, women like you all the time, and all this stuff, and something just didn't feel right. Like, I knew in this kind of cliche storyline that she's there to help, but she was gonna bring her back to the Rape Brothers. And guess what? She fucking does! She's like, oh yeah, this is my home, and we're right by the American Embassy, and she's like, oh, I'll get you some clothes. The clothes are in the basement. The clothes are in the basement. And then you want her to walk down to the basement before you. I'm sorry. If someone tells me the clothes are in the basement, and I knew I was just locked in the basement, I'd be like, nah, I'll sit here in the living room, you'll get it, and I'll change in the bathroom. Run away. But of course she gets to the basement, sees that fucking mattress and chains, and then of course, you know, crazy, you know, like Kasha, or whatever her name is like, oh, spit, punch in the face. Yeah, thanks, your help. So there's this gross, big, fat guy, like, paid them or something so he could have fun with her, and starts cattle prodding the fucking girl. He starts cattle prodding the poor girl. And of course, again, the scene takes so long. Like, they really want to hammer in just how fucking tortured this girl, like, has gotten. Like, it's horrible. So then he also, like, freaking cattle prods her in her fucking downstairs mix-up. Like, yeah, she hasn't been, like, tortured enough. Let's do that. And then after tasing her down there, more rape ensues. At least they don't show it, but it was insinuated. But then the aftermath was worse, because then they see her, and she's just bloody down there. Like, oh my god. It's like your second day of your period, and you sneeze while in your sleep, you didn't realize, and you woke up. I'm just saying that's what it looked like. So of course the older brother, Pete, beats her up, because why not? She hasn't, you know, had enough pain. Christ. So then they put her in that box that she was shipped in, and then they bury her under the basement and all that stuff. They're like, we're just gonna bury you alive. We're not gonna kill you. We're gonna bury you alive, just so, again, to further torture you. But at least she lucks out, and the weight of her in that box, they were just so happened to be right, like, above, like, a sewer tunnel or something, and she falls right through it. And she's fine and technically escapes that way. And then, well, her journey in the sewer tunnel, they keep fading, like, to black. Like, oh, she walked over there, fade to black. And she's walking down this tunnel, fade to black. Pretty much to show you that to show that she's been walking a while. And also, so you can't tell that they're using the same, like, 2 to 3, like, sections, that she's literally walking back and forth. He finds, like, this little hobo spot, with no hobo there, I guess, ex-hobo. Grabs some hobo clothes, and there's some pigeons, because hobos are best friends with pigeons. And then she sees, like, a doorway. She gets in there, and it's a kitchen. She steals a bunch of food. Turns out it's a kitchen to a church. So, of course, a priest hears it, because what else is happening in churches? And he tries to help her, and she's like, thanks, son. You actually hear, like, third act music playing. Like, oh, that's the third act. So cue all the now it's her time to torture everyone. So, of course, the first person she grabs is Harpo, because he's, like, the easiest one to get. And in the sewer tunnel, she, like, chains him up, he's stripped down to his underwear, and just starts cutting him in places. And then, with his open wounds, she, like, puts, like, rotted food that was, like, you know, in a gross can, all over his wounds, just so it just could... Yeah. Ketamine brother is at a club. She follows him there, and she, you know, puts a bit of ketamine in his drink. She lures him into the bathroom, and oh my god, it's so gross. So she's fighting him, she locks the door, you know, all that stuff in the bathroom. She dunks his head into a clogged toilet, covered in piss, like, it's full of piss, it's all gross. Still, the guy is like, because he's on ketamine, he's like, oh my god. Then, you know, fuck it. Because she was tortured to death, like, to half death. Might as well make it even worse on him. And then the last thing she does is dunk his head into a different clogged toilet full of shit. It's just, yeah. And so then she leaves. She, like, washes the duty off her hands. Like, oh, let me just wash this duty off my hands. Like, I got duty on me. Like, ew, bitch. Pour some bleach on there. Light a fire. Like, oh my god. So she leaves the bathroom, and these people, like, see the guy, and they're like, oh, what a drunk. Alright. Alright. So she goes back to where she has kept Harpo, and of course his wounds are starting to get all, like, infected or getting gross. She takes a rusty pipe and starts shoving it, like, into his wounds. Yeah, just make matters worse. It's fine. It's fine. So she follows that big gross guy who prodded her in the cooter to church, because of course he's a churchgoer. Somehow able to get him, like, I guess into the sewer or something. I don't know how she was able to do that. She's a tiny girl. Anyway, puts him on, like, you know, like an old rickety bed and, you know, prods his crotch. But of course that's not the end of it. She puts, like, a drain snake that you normally put down, like, obviously a drain, toilet, anything that's clogged, down his throat, like, just feeds it down his throat, and then turns it on. And while that is happening, he gets electrocuted because of whatever shitty old Eastern European wiring that's happening down there. Because apparently there's still electricity going down to the sewers. So the woman who betrayed her at the police station gets put into the box. And of course she's freaking out because she's in the box. Well, hey, that's your family. You're part of that fucked up family. That's what you get. So of course, like, the last person is the big brother. And he literally, she literally has his balls in a vice. And you see it. I have to black box it here. But no, you see some balls in a vice. I couldn't help but laugh just because it's like, oh my god. They either just lightly cupped his real balls in that vice, or they actually had to go to, like, the props department and say, hey, can you make me a set of balls? Because we gotta put it in a vice. Anywho, she squeezes that thing that hard that one of them, the one of the testicles, pops out. And then you see it just on the ground. Just because that's what it looks like outside of the skin. But yeah. So then after all the torture's done, she kind of just leaves everyone just kind of there. The policeman who first, or detective guy who first saw her at the police station and spoke to her, was like, you know, with his gun, he gets there in time, like, yo, what the fuck? And she's like, oh, I had to do it, because you know what they did to me. And he's like, alright, fucking Americans. And then, yeah, so he does something, and then she's like, I'm just gonna go to the US Embassy and get the fuck out of here. Anyway, totally got off scot-free. No homicide charges are against me, because this is all in self-defense. They raped and tortured me, so then I stalked them and killed them. Yay! The end. They ain't got no condoms. Yeah, under she has consumption, I wrote down, you more than fucked now. And horribly enough, after they have sex, the girl dies. It's like, oh, wow. Alright. Flash forward to the present. Dementia and stuff. I really wouldn't suggest you watching this movie, because it would probably be just, like, not okay. You know, like, there's a few parts where, like, because they're old and they get kind of forgetful, and, like, grandpa, like, starts putting on, like, a tux, and the girl is like,